Okay, so it's time to gather our supplies. We've got one freshly warped moon loom from the Unusual Pair, nice and tight, one needle, one pair of scissors, and a lovely selection of yarn. This yarn here is a hand spun one that I spun myself. The next one is a bit of a chunkier one, and then I've got a fine one as well, or more fine. It's nice to have a selection of yarns just for different textures, and generally I start with the thinnest yarn because I find it easier at the beginning. Okay, so once you've chosen your first yarn, cut off a length and thread it onto your needle. I'm going to start at the top of my loom today, but you can start wherever you like. We're just going to go under a warp thread, and to secure the beginning of this strand of yarn, we're going to tie a knot. Just a simple overhand knot, and tuck the end through to the back of the loom because we'll clean these up afterwards. Now, the very first basic weaving stitch you learn is called tabby, and it's essentially over one, under one. So you're passing the needle over one warp thread and under the next. Once you've completed a row, you push them up to the top, that's called beating, and then you turn back to do the next row. On this second row, you'll notice that you're alternating the warp strings to the first row. So where you went under, you now go over. Because a moon is a little bit different to a rectangle, the rows can be a little bit tricky to work out. You just basically eyeball it and keep extending your rows by 1 or 2 warp threads every couple of times. But you're basically just filling in the moon shape, so there's no wrong way to do it. Just keep weaving until it's all filled in. The pointy end is slightly tricky, but just see if you can get your needle under that very end one. We want to cover as many of the holes as we can so it has a nice finished look when it's all done. Be mindful as you're weaving, especially if you're a beginner, to stop every few rows and just check you're still alternating. You'll be able to tell if you've perhaps gone under 2 or over 2 because you'll get more warp threads showing and less weft. So it's no drama, but if you keep an eye on it, you can catch mistakes early. Once you're finished with this colour, just tie a knot over one of the warp threads, and again we're going to tuck the end to the back of the loom. Flip your loom over to the back, and now that that piece of yarn has been securely tied around the warp threads, you can snip off the ends. Nice and tidy. So that's what it looks like. That's a plain tabby weave, and for this video that's all we're going to do. So get weaving, pick some colours, alternate as you go, do it all one colour, whatever speaks to you, and I'll see you when you get to the end. As you can see, I've almost finished my weaving. I've filled in my loom from the top to the bottom, and I've just got this little space down here left to go. You might like to start stitching as if you're doing embroidery at the moment, back to front, just to make it easier to fit those last couple of rows in. Again, it's a little bit tricky at the pointy end, but just work with what you've got and see if you can fit it in so it's nice and tidy along that bottom edge. It's all done. It's time to flip the loom back over and tidy up those ends. If you've tied a knot around the warp thread, you can just simply snip them off. If you haven't and you have two next to each other, you can tie them in an overhand knot, a double knot, and then trim the ends nice and close. You want the back to be as neat as it can be so that when it's hanging on the wall, it hangs flush with the wall and doesn't stick out. So now the moon is all finished. You can either hang it straight on the wall, or if you'd like to do a little bit more detail work, you can thread a piece of yarn and pass it through all the holes around the edges. This just gives a little bit more detail along the edge. Totally optional, but if you like the look of it, give it a go. Feel free also to shuffle around your weft if you need to fill in any holes or gaps. Just make it look beautiful, ready to brighten up your lovely space. Thanks so much for watching and happy weaving!